Hello.
It's us now.
It's us.
Hi.
It's on. Amazing.
I don't think we practiced an intro.
No.
But
So
we-
introduce yourself.
Me first?
Yes,
I was going to
yes.
introduce what we're talking about.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Well, we are talking about animating in the MOBA genre.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Let's start down at the end with introductions.
All right. I am Jay Hosfeld. I'm the lead animator at Epic Games on Paragon, and I've been there for several years, and that's our latest project.
Right. I'm Alex Lehman. I'm an animator and art director at Riot Games, and I work on League of Legends.
My name is Lana Bashinsky. I am an animator at Blizzard Entertainment for Heroes of the Storm. And today we're going to be rolling through each of our individual games, and we get to have one person on the console taking us through a bit of their work and giving us some examples, and then the other two get to heckle them or ask questions about their work. And we're each going to take a turn, and we're going to try and get through some cool animations today. And Alex is going to start us off with some League of Legends.
Yeah, I think, just working on MOBAs can be so different. Like you see Paragon and you see League of Legends and Heroes of the Storm. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the characters that we worked on. And the first character that I brought up is Draven. And the reason I brought him up is he's probably one of the characters that was the easiest for me to animate. And the cool thing is neither Jay nor Lana know what we're going to show, like what I'm going to show, and vice versa. I don't know what they're going to show. So this is just us jamming and talking a little bit about our approach. So if you don't play League of Legends, Draven is a really cool gladiator guy. He is a little bit full of himself. He thinks that he knows best, but he really doesn't. And that's what I really found really appealing about him. And so originally, when he was pitched to the team, he was just a gladiator. He was like, super bloodthirsty. Let's kill people. And I thought that's a little bit one-dimensional. I just didn't want to animate just a dude killing people. And so I thought, what would I like, and what was it like to be a gladiator? And it's, the closest thing that I could come up with is like the WWE. And so I thought, like, what if he's like Macho Man Randy Savage? What if he's, like this dude that thinks super highly of himself and is like, super excited. But he's good at killing. But on the other hand, his weakness is also that he thinks he's really strong. And because of that, because all of his motions are just like huge and big, he's such a doofus. It was super easy to animate this guy. This was one of my favorite animations that I worked on, where he's just like cheering up the crowd. And this was the moment where we decided it's like, he is so full of himself. He thinks that League of Legends is his game. And so he literally says, this is the League of Draven. So really fun character to work on. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how I start a character like this. I actually start with one pose. That's all I do. I create the idle pose first, and it's literally one pose, not multiple poses. It's just until I find this one pose. And then I create one pose for every animation. So I have one pose that's the run, and I have one pose that's the first attack, and I have one pose that's the idle. And I hook them up in the game. And it looks really not good, but you can immediately play the game. Like in a day, in 1 day, 2 days, you can run around in the game and you go like, okay, here is he sliding as in his run pose, or like his throw is just like his arm extended and the axe is gone, and you get like, oh, okay, I guess he threw his axe. And so you have early on, you have like the conversations with the designers, and you can just talk about whether that is a good pose and whether it actually explains the gameplay really well. Yeah.
And do you guys, I assume that's also testing how those poses feed into each other? Like
totally, yeah. So, as soon as so for someone like Draven, I need to find about 16 poses that really explain the gameplay. But in order to get there, I probably generate like 50 different poses before I'm like happy. And it's all about flow. It's like how do I get from the idle to the attack animation, right? Like this is our new practice tool, so it's really awesome. I can just level him up and go through all the spells, right? one of the things that we really wanted to get to is the ultimate, like where he shows off that he's the coolest guy in the building, and he fires off these axes, and at some point they're going to come back and he has to catch them. Another mechanic that we worked on a lot is that he can throw his axe and then has to catch it again. And so we had to figure out a lot of tech in that moment, like a lot of additive animation where the arm reaches for the axe and that kind of stuff.
And can he move around while he's waiting for that?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can actually, here, let's go. Killed the minion too fast. My minions are too strong. Let's go here. Yeah, well, let's go auto refresh cooldowns, so I don't have to worry about that. Boom. You can run around, but like if you are here, of course he's not going to catch it. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, like in this case, part of the fun is that you have to juggle where you're throwing and where you have to catch it. And if your opponent is good, he will shoot some, like he will know where you're going to be next and going to shoot at you.
So those are big axes he's carrying around, but they're pretty long blades. Were there any struggles that you came across when it came to, because I was actually very surprised to see that he was a ranged character. So were there struggles dealing with his actual attack range, or making sure that people knew that they were axes as opposed to swords?
So the weapons were actually the thing that we liked the best about it. But we had never seen a weapon like this. If you actually zoom in, you'll see that they spin around. Like he only holds like a ring, and they spin around it. And in order to figure them out, I actually went and bought giant cardboard. I drew them on cardboard, and I actually built them because I needed to hold these things. And I was just like, how would I even hold them? And then I held my wrists out, and I tried to, like, how would I spin them? I mean, I didn't build the spin mechanic in cardboard, but it was cool because for a while everyone at Riot was running around with these cardboard axes and trying to, figure out how to animate this character.
So you mentioned that it was the easiest character for you to animate. Can you tell us, was it just because you felt like you could connect really well with that attitude, or what was it about him that made him the easiest character for you to animate?
Well, it was easy because he has so much attitude that anytime something didn't work, we'd go like, okay, we're going to do something else. It's like there's always a moment where he has to put out the arms, where he has to just claim that he's the greatest. And so whenever emotion didn't work, it was just like, okay, how else could you just boast about who you are as a person? And in that regard, he was fairly easy to animate. And I'll talk about one of the hardest characters to animate, which is the opposite of that, where it's every piece of motion that I put on that character made her look like she is vain, or she is, she's confused, or she is, sad. And that was none of the emotions that we tried to bring across. For him, he has a very strong emotion, and it's just that, like, he's arrogant. He thinks he can beat anyone, and so it's very easy to find.
And it's true. Characters with flaws are easy. You could hang on that one thing, but if it's like a Disney prince,
right,
it's hard to hang anything on.
Can you just animate perfection, please?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it's very boring.
Okay, so I'm gonna unhook here real quick, and I'm gonna switch over to Diana, who is the character that was much harder to animate.
I'm losing track of the mic here. So Jay, are you noticing anything right away that feels like super, super familiar about going through this? I don't know if you've played a lot of League of Legends in your time, or...
I have. I've at least gotten through the tutorial levels before. But yeah, it's familiar because MOBAs have different abilities, and you have to kind of do tells before you do a particular move. A lot goes into your idle pose because your idle pose has to look like you're not about to do one of your bigger abilities. I did notice, I had a question for you. When he's running around, both blades are behind him, and when he stands, one moves forward. Was that more the focus of aiming one forward, or having one kind of more back, like in anticipation that he's about to throw it?
So if you watch the GDC talks last year, I talked about a trick that we're using for attacks where we put the anticipation at the end of the cycle. Right. In this case, the idle pose, we want a nice change between idle and run. And putting them backwards in the run was just like looking much cooler than in the idle pose. You kind of want to go like, yeah, I'm ready to shoot at any time. So that's the decision there. So this is Diana, and Diana came, I think, right after Draven. So I was on a high. I was like, big motion. It's super easy to animate, no matter what I want to do. And then came Diana. And the story of Diana is that she just killed a bunch of her folk and her people, and she's very determined. She's very sad, but not in an expressive way. It's more like reflective internally. She's thinking about, was that the right decision? I'm following the moon. Everyone in my family follows the sun. What can I do about it? And so anything that I put on Diana was too much. So early on, I had an idle pose that I was really happy about. Okay, we got it. That mic is fine? Okay, so we're going to use this mic now. Early on, I had an idle pose like this, and I was really happy about the idle pose. But the moment I started to just give her something to do, for instance, like she touched her hair, it looked like she is vain, and she's like, she's all about beauty. Or the moment she just stepped back, it looked like she is afraid of what she did. And so getting her right was so hard, coming off Draven, where every movement was big, and getting her to have just determination, but not be this overbearing character. Yeah, she was much harder.
So what was your favorite part about animating her then?
Yeah.
If you have one.
I would say the challenge that came with it. Here, I'll show you guys something in a second. The attack animation is very much inspired by an old game called Strider. Here, we'll get to it in a second. So first of all, she has an ability where she can send out the moon like this. But you'll see she has big, giant swings. And what I learned, so with every character you learn something new. Diana's attack from this side to this side is 2 frames. So she has 1 frame here, 1 frame in the middle, and then she's already on the other side, and then there's just an overshoot and a settle. And with her, no matter what I did, the animation didn't look great. And so I started looking into what could be the problem. And one of the animators said, have you looked into subframes? And so I was like, no, I haven't looked into subframes. So what we started to look at is half frames or tenths of frames. And what I found out is that my middle pose here was slightly tilted, and this pose here was slightly tilted this way. And so in the subframes, you could clearly see that she overshoots, undershoots, and comes back.
So,
and you see that actually in the animation. You feel it. You can't really see it, but...
So is that something you were looking at when you had pulled it up in game, or is that
Maya.
something in Maya?
Yeah. So I went all the way in Maya. I actually went in between. Through subframes, I found out that I'm overshooting and undershooting, and that the beautiful Strider motion that I wanted didn't look good. And after I figured that out, I could now correct my poses to actually be right. And then I also put keyframes on subframes to just nail it down because I wanted it there.
Control the machine.
And you guys export at 30 frames a second, sampled animation?
We only, so it's only 30 frames a second, but you can still feel it if it's slightly off, because it's not it's not whole frames that the game engine exports, right?
Yeah, and the game engine renders in ticks. It's not gonna play your keys.
Exactly.
I had the biggest problem with that with some of our heroes, which I guess I should wait to talk about. But doing something in 1 frame and the way that it hits on a certain game loop, every once in a while, it looks like 3.
Yeah.
And it's more sluggish than you want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's another thing that designers oftentimes ask us. They want everything as reactive as possible, right? The moment you lock down the character where they have to stop for a moment, designers don't like that because it stops the flow. And so we had this motion where she needed the shield. But I wanted to put something on it. And at that point, our additive animation system wasn't very good. So we came up with a simple trick where we just make her jump. And the cool thing is that she can traverse during that time, or she could just be standing and just doing this motion. Mm-hmm. She does a big motion on her upper body that just masks that moment. Mm-hmm. And so whether running or idling, it just works. Simple trick to get around game engine limitations that we had back in the day.
And as an animator on games in general, I know a lot of times we start with the idle pose, which is always the best idea. You want to start with your idle. but sometimes we assume an animation we're doing is always going to start from the idle, and we don't assume it's going to actually start from the run.
Right.
Probably 90% of the time.
Oh yeah.
Or have you found in League of Legends that characters are usually running? So in case of her additive.
Yeah, most of the time, characters are running. And speaking of which, so with every character I animate, I always try something out. On her, there's a run cycle that if you chase her, she will look backwards. She's the only character that we did that in the game because players didn't notice it. And usually when we try something new, there's a lot of really good reaction to it. And since we didn't find any reaction to it, we're like, oh, no one noticed, not worth it. Let's not spend more time on it. On Draven, Draven was the first character where we actually animated a recall. And then the other team that was working on Darius saw it and really, really liked it and put it on Darius. So Darius is the first one that shipped with it, but Draven was the first one that had it.
So what did you guys do prior to that? You just had the effects
We
play the recall?
literally played an idle animation. Yeah.
So what were you thinking, like when you did that recall for the first time? What is that? You said that she's really stoic and kind of sad, but really subdued. Like what was your thought behind? That was the first recall you did for this character. Why was she the one?
So Draven was the first one, and it came from his attitude, right? So I thought about if Draven teleports back, what would he do? And he would point back to where he's going. He's just like, that's where I'm going. And so I asked the designer to hook it up so Draven jumps up, we're rotating him in the game, always to point at base, and he points back. And it was so much of his attitude. And then people really liked it, and we put it on Darius. And then we looked at Diana, and then the question is like, what would she do? I mean, she wouldn't be, all about it. And she's very pious, so so her job here is to pray to the moon, right? She is praying to the moon goddess that she worships so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good opportunity to show character because otherwise they're always running and fighting and running, and you could show character in it, but it's secondary to the moves. When you have something where they're standing and the spotlight's literally on them, it's a great opportunity to show lore and.
Fully agree, yeah, and those are the fun moments, right? As awesome as it is to animate runs and attacks and this kind of stuff, the moment where you can show a lot of character is in let the character stand around, find a good idle pose. What is she doing during that time, right? It's very determined. She's just looking for more enemies or. Like she's just leaning on the side. It's very simple stuff. Her laugh is literally just a ha. That's it. So like every character in the game has a big laugh. She's just like scoffing at you. That's it. I think I have one more minute before we want to switch over.
Yeah, I don't know if we've been having questions in the chat. We have one for Alex here.
Oh, we have general ones.
A general.
Okay, general
Let's
one.
take a general one.
We'll take a general one.
Let's see. Litchfield says, how do you know the moment to finish an animation?
Oh, wow.
The question was, how do you know a moment to finish an animation?
The day of the deadline. That's when it's finished.
Yeah, I think we should all answer that question. How do you do that? How do you finish? When do you know it's done?
When my lead says stop.
Okay.
I know an animation when I feel sort of, I don't want to say personally satisfied by it. That seems like a really overly sentimental response to it. Because usually it is my boss being like, you did it. But I know sometimes I finish an animation, I think, yeah, that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you always want to finish an animation and present it. And I think an animation's done when it looks good as an animation, say in Maya. It has to feel good when you play it, and it has to communicate the gameplay it's supposed to communicate. And in order to get the feedback that's done, you're having to get that from the design team, the art team, and playtesting.
Right. Yeah, for me it's so I work in layers. I know I have a character. Maybe I have like 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever time I have. And that's why I start with like the 16 poses, and then I look at what's the first one I want to flesh out. I flesh that one out and get it to a certain level. And so at some point you run out of time, right? And that's what we oftentimes jokingly say is like you're never done. You're just out of time, and there's a truth to it. Let's see if I find one of my mini characters I worked on this map on.
And
So,
I think the out of time thing helps because
Yeah.
a lot of us would, you might just noodle something and you're actually not making it better. You're second guessing a prior decisions sometimes when you
Oh, yeah.
rework and renoodle. So deadlines are a good thing.
Yeah. I can find, so sometimes you'll find a little snail in the base. One of my favorite animations I did, it's a tiny character that has 3 joints, and there's so much love in how she pulls forward and pulls after and pulls after. So if you guys play League of Legends, look for the snail. It was a ton of fun to animate.
The love in the little things.
Love and little things. Okay,
So we got to swap.
so we got to swap over to
Me now.
to you.
We're going to talk
Okay.
about heroes.
And we're going to swap places.
And I think you have to hold this now.
Okay,
And use the lapel mic. You have to hold that for me.
I'm going to hold the mic.
Okay. So let me
let's-
get out of here.
Exit game.
Hot mouth. New game.
So Alex, how many animations would you say on average are in a character?
So when I started on League, it was 16 animations, pretty strict, like exact, like 1 run, 4 attack, 2 attacks, 1 crit, 4 spells, that kind of stuff. Draven had about 40. Zed, I couldn't show Zed, but Zed had about 60. And I think nowadays we're somewhere, it really depends on the character, anywhere between 50 to 100. Like they just become more complex, and we're trying to do more. How's it on Paragon?
Paragon is it's about the 80 to 100 range right now.
Yeah.
And of course there's emotes, and
Right.
depending on the ability, some abilities require additives
Yeah.
where others don't, so it fluctuates.
And is every character the same? It's like, so it's a blueprint, like do these 80 and then the next character has these 80 too?
I think for the most part there's probably a basis there. I don't think it's up in the 80 range. I think maybe it's like 60. So you have your
Okay.
directional runs and your idle, you always have that. But once you get to abilities, those can really blossom into multiple animations.
Right. Yeah.
And then, of course, there are the emotes and anything that the kind of scripted moments,
Yeah.
those can grow or shrink as well.
Do you get to experiment on characters? Oh, we're in,
Where to go?
we're
You
in
can
hot.
answer that question if you want.
I
just jump into
actually,
it?
the question's for you right now. Do you
What
get
was
to
it?
experiment on characters? Do you do crazy stuff on one character you don't do on another character?
Yeah, I would say so, and I'll try and go through that with one of my next heroes. I'm going to quickly look at Kelthus here. He was I think he was the first hero that I fully animated. So I was maybe a year into working full time at Blizzard. I started as an intern back in the day, and he's fun in a way because he was what's it called? He's a really popular hero. People like playing him because he's really powerful and he does crazy amounts of damage and he's got some fun abilities. But I don't want to say I hate all of his animations, but it was so early in my career that there are a lot of mistakes that I feel like I made. And it was tough. His cape is all hand keyed with a little love from like procedural sort of generated thing, but I would say 90% hand keyed on the cape, which was really challenging. He had this big head thing. I didn't really know what I was. Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
can the chat see? No,
One
I'm
second.
seeing.
that's 1 sec.
We can't see it, but I'm looking at something.
This is there, and let's go back.
Oh, I have an
No.
idea. It's gonna do that, and then maybe options. We're gonna do a windowed full screen and see what happens.
There we go. Welcome back. Yay! Now
you can
with
see.
much more
There you go.
graphics.
Yay, there's Kelthus, and there's his cape, and there's his body, and he's a silly dude. But I think it was very funny you were talking about how most poses come into and out of the idol, and Kelthus was my first sort of experiment in trying to animate in a game where I did have everything go back to the idol, and everything about him had to feel super powerful, and I have it all coming back to that idol, but I didn't, nothing felt right. For me, nothing about this hero felt right. He sort of pops, he doesn't have a transition out of his ready stance there, so he can do that, and then he just jumps back out of his walk ready into a plain walk. It's just for me, I see a lot of bugs in him, and he was a fun hero to work on because he's got so much lore, but he's not one of my favorite heroes that I've ever done. So this is sort of my early trying to animate for a fast-moving sort of thing like Heroes of the Storm, and then I'll show you one of my newer heroes. He dances. He does
So-
Jump on it. Jump on it.
Do you do your own dances when
I
you?
do. I have way too many reference videos of me doing
Yep.
just horrible things.
Oh
and,
yeah.
And I assume we've talked about this in the past with framing, animations, and staging. So top down, do you guys really have to tweak the animations to read from top down versus what you would typically animate from front?
Yes, absolutely. And we do get chances to show things from the front. I'll actually exit the game here because we have our hero select is front and center, and we get a chance to do home screens, which I will show you here.
And do you use the same animation asset for that, even though the staging's different?
We do. The home screen we've been pushing a lot more. Whoa, go away. So I animated this guy, and that's Lucio's in-game model. And he's the newest hero I animated. I'm gonna try and ready up for something without, or maybe I'll just do first AI, practice mode, training, and I will go. Where is he? There he is. So this is the front and center. This is the same stand that we have in the game, and it's also his same stand ready. Hopefully we get to see it. But this is probably the favorite animation I've done, and it cut it right off because it's all AI. But that's his in-game ready stand. I guess you asked if we tweak it, and we usually
Right,
do.
yeah.
In this case, it worked out really well. But usually, like Kael'thas, to make his arms show in game out from under those things, his whole body was pretty much cranked forward with his shoulders constantly trying to be out from under those shoulder pads.
Right.
Meanwhile, for somebody like Lucio, he's more visible just in general.
And do you ever tweak a pose here so it reads better towards the game camera? Do you animate in game camera in 3D Studio Max?
I do. For Lucio, that was particularly challenging. Most of these animations were obviously referenced from Overwatch. It had to feel exactly like the Lucio people would know from the other game. And Jesse Davis did the original animations for Lucio. And finding ways to tweak his run, because he has a much slower walk when he's in his healing mode. So he had to do this little glide. And then when he's in his fast mode, when you go upwards, he ended up looking really, really silly, which is something you never really saw from Overwatch. He looks almost like he's just running on the tips of his toes, or initially he did. And so we had to tweak it to make it feel more like that weight was pushing through the feet and his skates were actually doing something or holding up his body at all. For Lucio, he was funny because we had to get him onto and off of this wall. And I initially had animated when he came off the wall, he did a huge jump. He did a big pose in the air and he landed, and it was a low priority animation, so if you're doing something else, it wouldn't have it. We had to cut it because it didn't feel quite right enough for what we needed to
And that
do.
particular animation on that wall has nothing to do with gameplay, correct? Is that just a
Absolutely.
character moment?
No, it has
Or-
something to do with gameplay. He gets a speed boost.
Oh, he gets a
So
speed
his-
boost when he
his
does
trait,
it.
and
That's
it
awesome.
grants him walk, so he can go through enemy heroes without being obstructed.
Was there any animation that was harder to do on him than the other ones?
Than other heroes?
No, like within the character, like within the hero. One animation you really struggled with and go like, oh man, this is hard to figure out.
Yeah, probably his dance, even though there's reference for it. But that's like Lucio's quintessential thing that he does, and there's so many GIFs that people already made of Lucio's dance. And going through that animation and trying to find those beats where all the pieces of his body felt heavy, but he's supposed to be light on his feet, but having the weight of the armor that he's wearing and stuff. This one was particularly challenging.
So I could imagine that one of the questions is that that players ask is why not just reuse the animations from Overwatch? I mean, you guys have them already, right? Copy paste.
You might think that. Not the case. My team works in 3D Studio Max.
Okay.
They work in Maya. They are a newer team. They have lots of newer tools. They have way more robust rigs. We have certain budgets we have to adhere to that are not the same as first person, up close. I'm going AFK, I guess. I'm not killing
Participate,
anything.
kill
I'm
some
participating.
minions.
I'm
Be
going,
part
I'm
of
going.
it. Your bots are dying.
Yeah, my team is pissed
The
at me right now.
bots.
Okay, go away, Murden. Boom.
Kill him.
Go away. I don't like you. Meow. There we go. We got a little amp it up. And I forgot the question. I'm sorry, I'm getting very distracted by.
Just about why you can't reuse the animations from Overwatch directly.
Because our game has very, very different
Pipelines,
technical requirements,
Right.
essentially. And a lot of things that you would see in Overwatch you would never see in our game. So it's really superfluous to keep a lot of those things in there. They have very, very high definition faces and fingers and bodies, and like you never see his little hands. It's just a little fist on that gun. And so we don't need to open up the sound. We don't need those bones. We don't need that bogging down the game with the unnecessary data.
How do you think about death animations?
How do I think about them? I think they're cool.
What do you go through? What are you trying to, like, what's your thought process there?
We don't have death animations.
Ah.
We have ragdolls, which are also cool.
Yeah.
We have one character that has a death animation, which was Ragnaros, and he is because he can't ragdoll. He has a big fiery skirt on his butt, and if we had him ragdoll, he ended up looking really silly because you'd see this big bell bottom swinging around because you'd get something, the impact from it would just send your character flying across the screen. You see the bottom of this fiery thing, it should leave this smeary lava trail, and that didn't work out, so he has a flamey death animation.
Cool.
But I think they're a really cool chance to show off part of a character and how their attitude is and where they're struggling. You guys do a lot of death animations, yeah?
Yeah, but we also don't have a ragdoll system. You know, like the grass is greener wherever you go. You know, like it's. There are many moments where I wish we had a physics system because everything is hand keyed. Everything, like every cloth, everything. But you know, like that. Yeah, and that gives us the opportunity to have custom death animations that are elaborate. But then on the other hand, yeah, you know, we have to animate cloth.
So I'm going to show you one
We
more
solve that
hero
in
here. This is Chromie. She's a gnome, but she's actually a dragon IRL. She just prefers to be shown as a gnome. And she was my first attempt at animating like classically cartoony animation.
Yeah.
When I was studying, I wanted to animate monsters. All I wanted to do was make Godzilla destroy things. That was my goal in my whole life. And then Chromie got plopped onto my plate, and I was terrified. But she's like the first character in our game who actually gets to run because she has such short legs. She gets to sprint.
She still has a Godzilla-like character. that
She
pops
does,
out.
yeah.
It's the best of both worlds.
She's got the soul of a beast.
So what did she do? Did she just say "oops" afterwards? So
She
like
goes,
she's.
So how much time do you have for a character?
We have 6 weeks.
Okay.
Now we have 6 weeks. When Heroes first released, so a lot of our older heroes were animated. It's like 60-something animations were done in two weeks a hero,
Wow.
which is psychotic. And then over time, we pushed out the schedule. Now we have 6 weeks and a couple animators starting to work on a hero at once.
Okay.
So how do you navigate that where you do want to get animation feedback, but if a schedule's that tight, do you guys do a round of feedback, or is it you really have to solve what you want up front?
We try and do a lot of solving up front. We try to do a lot of iteration at the beginning. So rather than showing off, more final things earlier, we would definitely show a lot of earlier blocking work. Whereas back in the day, it'd be like, I have these 10 animations. Choose one you get to critique. But if we're really strapped for time, it is all about prioritization. Do the main abilities feel good? Do the ultimate abilities feel good? Does the player know what they're trying to do and how hard they're hitting the enemy team?
What is the first animation you cut if you run out of time? Like, where's the break even? Is it like the dance? You have to have a dance, right?
Because we have
Players would be very sad if.
We have a hero where their heroic ability forces everybody to dance in a circle around them for 5 seconds.
Right.
So actually, dancing is a part of our gameplay.
Yeah, right.
So it is mandatory. She does the time warp.
Nice.
Thanks. Sorry. But probably stand variations. Chromie doesn't have a stand variation.
Okay.
So that's probably the we need a charger in here.
We need to make sure that the charger is actually on because we just get that the battery is low.
Yeah.
Can you guys make sure that we get some energy?
We need it.
Is it turned off?
I'm right now, guys.
Now with much more energy. Okay.
And then I think we have like 1 more minute if we want to do another chat question.
Before we switch to Jay.
Yeah, we can answer the question while I switch.
Is it common for one person to tackle an
I think we can answer that.
I think I pretty well just did answer that one.
So you said you guys have about 6 weeks?
About 6 weeks.
And about 2 animators on that 6 weeks, or
Say
1 animator?
One animator with a support animator.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we do. We have a main animator and a support animator at 6 weeks.
Yeah, and we had the exact same thing. It's 6 to 8. There's like a week of pre-pro, 6 weeks the main animator, and 1 week of post-production, and then 2 of those we get support, and then it swaps. So every other character, you were the support, and the other guy was the main, and it was great because they would already tackle the next champion, and by the time you join, you just bang out some keyframes. Don't really have to really think about it a lot, and then you go back into a character that you are driving.
And that must be a good system that works because we all independently
Completely
got to that point.
Yeah.
So
Didn't talk about it.
we have a question in the audience.
How do you divide up the work between primary and support?
So the question is, how do you divide what is primary and what is support? If you guys don't mind, I'll start. Primary is the person who has to figure out who the character is. They're doing the research into that idle pose. They're also tackling the abilities. The support is doing all the locomotion, hit reacts, the stuff that they actually don't have to put too much thought into.
Yeah, we do that very similar. That's why I'm saying that animator goes to the pre-production. You have all the meetings with the concept artist and the sound designer and whatnot. It's a very cross-discipline team, and that's where we make a decision. Like Draven now becomes Macho Man Randy Savage, right? It's in the pre-production. The supporting animator wouldn't make that decision. They would just join later. But he or she makes the decision on the next character, which is exciting. You just join in, you go like, who's this character? What should I animate? Where do you need help? That's just a really good system.
When it comes to dividing between primary and support for us, we kind of have a moment where the lead will maybe hit up the primary animator and say, which ones do you not really want to do? And then you're like, these 7. And then even after that point, you could be like, actually, I've got time and I would really still love to do the taunt. And it's usually fine. We're really new to the 2-hero thing. That's like a brand new, we just stocked up enough that we have enough manpower to do that kind of.
Yeah, it's new for us as well.
Woman power.
In the last, I would say, 3 months, we switched to that. And it takes the pressure off. If you have one lone animator on one character, there's a lot of pressure on that person.
Oh, yeah.
And they can kind of be in their own island and not have someone with them to help out.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I'm about to load up Paragon. So we're in an open beta phase right now. So we're actually in some early stages where we are figuring out things. And let me go ahead and start a solo versus AI.
So you worked in third-person characters for a long time before that. Like switching onto MOBA as a genre and still being third person. What was the biggest switch for you mentally?
The biggest switch mentally is MOBAs have to communicate a lot more gameplay, and so things have to be at a slower, more readable pace. Whereas a game like Gears of War, we can kind of we didn't have to take so much into consideration with what we're communicating in our animations.
Right.
And so MOBAs, it's all about what you're about to communicate and what you're about to telegraph. It's far more important than in Gears of War.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to load up Howitzer. And I animated him over 2 years ago in the beginning of the Paragon project, and we're very much in an R&D phase. And back then, we had our basic animation set. When you guys see this, you'll see what I mean about the locomotion. We actually wanted the character to always face the direction they're running, like in y'all's game, because we didn't want to do strafe animations and backpedal, because it's just a lot of work.
Right.
We found out real quickly that doesn't work for a third-person game because you have to communicate who you're looking at and aiming at in a MOBA game. And if you're running towards the camera with your back to the opponent, yet me as a player, I can see that opponent. And they're in my reticle, yet my avatar is facing away from them, and I could fire any ability and take them out. I did not communicate to them that we're looking at them. So we had to do animations that are always facing the opponents. So we had to have a strafe system. So I think that's that's probably one of the bigger differences that we learned real fast. So this is Howitzer. He's a rabbit in a mech. And like I said, the reason we wanted characters to face the camera when they were running around is so we could show stuff like that. In the beginning, we're like, oh yeah, he'll run towards the camera. Well, now he never faces you.
Right.
So that was where we use things like recalls and level starts, and we're like, hey, we have to show there's someone in there. So here we have him coming out. You know, it's a recall. It's like this hodgepodge put together mech he has. So he's kind of adjusting it before he goes back. And then back then as well, we were going to say no mocap for anything. So we're keyframing everything. But as you can see from the art, the lighting and the shading and the environment, this is a beta map, so it's not as fleshed out. But the art was beautiful, and for us to get the fidelity we needed, we had to put a lot more texture into the animations, and the budget got really high with keyframes. So later characters, we switched to using a mocap as a basis, and then just keyframe heavily on that.
So is that rabbit in there the whole time in full, or do you do a model swap for him to jump out of the mech suit there?
He's in there in full. We have a replay system, so after a match you can load up the whole game and just fly a free camera around. And we felt it very important just to keep the fidelity there. And so he has facial animation going on while he's in here and firing, and you don't see it gameplay-wise, but you can see it on the replay.
But the animation that I see as a player and the opponent sees is actually the same. You guys don't do any tricks there, right?
That is the same. We have one case where we have a client-side animation that plays, but we are discussing that, having animations that play that are readable for the player view and the opponent view.
Right. Yeah, so for the first-person games, that's very common, right? You have the hand animations and there's no body, and then what they see is something completely different.
Yeah, and for us, it's simply a budget thing because we can't animate this whole anim set 2 times over. You know, we can make modifications.
Right.
So do you have like a bunch of emotes and stuff as well?
We do, and unfortunately, we don't have a practice mode in place where I can just run through everything, but we do. We have...
Do you want me to get you the gamepad?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll get the gamepad.
Mouse and keyboard's fine for now. Yeah, we have emotes. We're still, like I said, we're in beta mode, so we're fleshing out what emotes do you need in a game like this. What we found is you need a canvas for emotes, where if I'm battling and the opponent's way over there, there's never going to be a moment I could just stand still and do a taunt to him while he's looking. And so we're discussing things like upper body emotes. So if he's running away from someone, I can still hit an emote, and he might, another character might turn around and wave, or...
Right.
And so we like I said, we have a system of, we have a strafes, we have to do the turns and places, we have, let's see, alt fires.
When did you decide to use, so Unreal 4, super powerful engine with all the bells and whistles that an animator could ask for. When did you decide, for instance, to use physics rather than hand key?
We decided that up front, and in fact, even on this character, I asked the art director at the time, I said, please put clothy bits on characters or dangly bits, because as an animator, it's free smoothing out of your animations.
Oh, yeah.
And so for every level of settings, like the lowest settings that you play, the physics are always present?
Pretty much, for PS4, absolutely. We definitely have LOD levels where they go out pretty quickly.
Okay.
And we do have like a really low-end setting where if you have a low-end laptop and you still want to play this, and you're not going to care about the physics, you could turn it off.
Is there anything that you found particularly challenging about this perspective, this third person, but closer in, like those kind of objectives and things? Is there anything that was difficult to telegraph about the actual gameplay in particular from this, I can't think of the right word. Is it perspective?
Perspective, yeah, no, it's absolutely, and that's a very good question. So one thing is MOBAs, you kind of have to have a radius range of any of your abilities. And so a lot of our characters have guns, but if I get back far enough, his rocket launcher can't hit those guys, and that was probably that's the biggest disconnect.
Right.
And so we have to do a lot of like UI work to show you when a character is going to be in range, and so a lot of our projectiles kind of have to have this, like in this case, it just explodes in the air. It timed out and it exploded. The other thing is like punching. Any jab motions we have aren't readable because it's foreshortening. They're punching ahead. So we have to do a lot of haymaker swings for our melee characters.
How often do you do squash and stretch to do that? Like, because it's not a cartoony game, right? How far are you guys going in your poses?
We definitely have squash and stretch for, like, it's very subtle though. It's like for runs to get kind of the impact. We are actually will put translate in the spine, but we're definitely not getting cartoony. Every now and then we will stretch a pose, and we're actually learning now that while we start off with mocap base and things do look realistic, we want to put more style into it, and so we're actually getting more squash and stretch in our characters. So I'm going to play one of our later ones. So actually, everything there that you saw in Howitzer was put in by me. All the animation work and the blueprints. We didn't have Laurent on the team at the time, so the animators were doing everything. And so he represents kind of our R&D, like I said, keyframe system. And I'm going to load up another character now.
So is that implementation portion of it, is that part of your 6 weeks, or is that 6 weeks you're solid just dedicated on
animating? At the time, that was. And that was part of it, and we had 8 weeks and only one animator.
Wow.
So it was very tight. All right.
While you're loading, what is one of your favorite characters that you animated on?
One of the favorite characters I animated on was, I actually meant to show him, I don't know why I loaded up Lucio actually, as Dahaka. He is a nasty little primal Zerg from StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm.
Right.
And he has these fun, nasty little abilities. He's kind of gross and kind of sneaky, and he doesn't ever get on a horse, so he gets to walk around like a creepy dude. And he fulfilled that Godzilla kind of love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm showing a character I did not animate, but she's one of our later ones. Now I'm leading a team of 10 animators. My time to animate a whole hero is just doesn't happen as much.
Significantly cut short.
Cut short. So this is Aurora. She was, looks like we had a hitch there. She's based on mocap, but so heavily modified by the animator. If you saw Howitzer, when he switched directions, he didn't kick out a leg.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was just one animation to another. So for these characters, we do forward and back transitions, side to side transitions.
And is she actually ramping up into the motion? So there's like a slowing in and out of that?
There's a
Delay.
slowing. There's a
Nice.
slowing in. So we do stops to starts on each direction, but we also do, if you're at full speed, we do the pivots. There's actually, a physics object she's tied to that has traction and its own velocity, and then we tie that to the speed of her animation, so her feet will never slide. It's like I mentioned earlier, we have a replay system where we want people to go back in and watch the game, and it was very important for us with fidelity just not to have all the feet sliding you typically see.
Right.
And then she's a melee character, so
Can you reuse some of the lessons you learn on her now on the next character? Is it easier because you guys figured out the blueprint and?
yeah, each character adds to our arsenal of tools. So this is like, the other thing too is design told us when we do melee, we can't do full body. We can't do root motion melee. It has to be like split upper body.
Mm-hmm.
So, when she's idle, she's playing a full body animation that's keyframed. But if she's running in these 4 directions, she's playing an upper body animation. But if you notice, her hips are still spinning. So all we do is we just kind of reuse these strafe directions, but we just play them at a different angle.
Okay.
And so it really hides the fact that we're splitting her upper body.
Okay, we got 5 more minutes.
Do we want to take questions from the chat for the last 5 minutes? Do we have 5
grab
minutes?
one
Yeah,
more.
let's do it.
Or
Let's
no
do it.
minutes?
Any questions that you guys might have?
2 minutes. Yeah.
Who decides up
Oh, that's a good question. Do you guys do that?
We have been doing, I wouldn't say updates to legacy animations. We've done a couple where it's like, okay, that looks pretty buggy. But we've been squeezing in, like adding hearth animations to older heroes. Like I recently animated a hearth for one of our oldest warriors, ETC, where he rocks out, whereas before he just did this, channeling sort of animation. So if somebody has a slow period of time, you usually pick one of the older heroes and you try and style them up a little.
On Leak, it really depends. If it's just a simple update, if an animator has passion and has extra time, just grab the animation, fix it, run it by a designer so that we're not breaking anything, and then you ship it. When we do a full redo, we have a team that literally just looks into we want to reinvent a character, and then we destroy him completely and rebuild it from scratch. That's a different process.
Yeah, with us, it's all about priorities. So if we're typically we redo animations to support a change to an ability or a timing,
right?
Or if something just wasn't readable or really buggy. Otherwise, we kind of save it for later. So maybe we'll do a big hero update and really give them a new.
I mean, you guys are in open beta.
We're still in open beta, and there is. I've found animators, and I've done it myself, where we go back and just polish up an animation. No one's asked us to, but it's really accessible.
Can't help. Live game.
Yeah, live game.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, do we have another quick one?
Is it okay to reuse animations?
Oh, so on League we can't because the.
Oh, is it okay to reuse animations?
Right. Yeah. So on League we can't do that because every rig is different.
Yeah.
They're custom rigs.
Same with heroes. The wording of the question, it's okay, emotionally okay, but we don't do it.
I get that question asked daily because the budgets are expensive for these characters, and sometimes you get asked can't you just reuse animation from another one? And it's like, you can, but they're going to move just like the other character. With that being said, we have retargeted motion from characters to another, like hit reacts and a couple characters. Some of these side-to-side transitions, just getting the base legs, we've copied, but it was never a fast system.
I think one of the benefits so in MOBAs, readability is extremely important, right? And having custom move sets for every character so that you just now using a German term, Bewegungsgestalt, so that you can just read them from afar and see,
everybody
that
knows that one.
just seeing how the character moves, the gestalt of the motion. The motion itself can tell you, that is rise coming up, right? Even if you can't make out the character yet. And
that's true. In MOBAs, it's very important to know who the other opponent is instantly. And if you're sharing animations, you're going to confuse the player.
Do we have another? I'm going to keep going till Mike tells me to stop. Do we have another quick one?
We'll do it until they yank out the cable.
Exactly. Oh, he's yanking it.
Okay,
cable.
One more question.
I am my own biggest critic, and everything I do is horrible. So how long did it take you guys till you looked at your own work and you thought for the first time, okay, this does not look like old cards?
Oh, wow.
Do
you want to repeat the question?
Though, it's easy to get down on yourself, and everybody's their own biggest critic. And how long did it take for us to look at an animation and not think that we were trash people and animators? I believe. I can take this. I killed this. I still look at those animations and I think they look like garbage. And that's live in our game right now. The first animation that I've seen in my professional career is the one that bugged out and I couldn't show you guys, is Lucio's Ear Selected Animation is the first animation I think I've ever done in my life where I animated it and I said, that feels right. So it's been 3 years. And how many years of school? You tell me.
Yeah, I think that comes and goes. Sometimes you do an animation that you are happy with. And what's funny is sometimes that's the animation that gets critiqued the most. And you learn real quick, okay, I still suck. All right. I don't know. It's I think you never get there. You're never absolutely 100% comfortable with your work all the time.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that, but you will find animations that you just like. The Draven animation where he, riles up the crowd, I just like it. But I also see myself in it because I recorded myself and I just go yeah, that's Draven and it works, but I don't think it's a good animation. I just like it.
I'm going to say this one last thing. I read a really cool theory about talent versus perception of talent, and you should post on the AnimState forums or tweet one of us about it, and I will explain what that is later. This is really fun.
Speaking of tweet, yeah, let's bring up our Twitter accounts.
We have a very professional slide that we created not 2 seconds before we went live here.
We would not do that.
With our contact information. That's me. I'm Lana Bashinsky at Latinai on Twitter.
Jay Hosfeld at Hosfross.
And I'm Alex Lehman, and it's Alex M. Lehman at Twitter. That's it.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.